I was clutching my daughter Lily's hand in the ICU, her skin-cold tubes running in and out of her small body, while machines beeped like ticking clocks counting down a nightmare I couldn't escape. My eyes burned from 3 days without sleep. My hair was tangled, my voice was raw, but I wouldn't leave her side. That's when my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice cut through the sterile air like a knife. "Madison, your father's retirement party is tonight. You have to be there." I stared at Lily's pale face, her chest rising and falling under the ventilator. My lips trembled as I whispered, "Mom, Lily might die." There was a pause. So long I could hear the steady hiss of oxygen and the low hum of fluorescent lights above me. Then my mother spoke, her tone cold enough to freeze every inch of my spine. "Don't be dramatic, Madison. Family obligations come first." In that single moment, something inside me snapped. 3 days of terror, exhaustion, and silent prayers boiled over into a truth I'd been too afraid to speak for 37 years. I heard my own voice rise fierce and shaking. "Family obligations, my daughter's fighting for her life, and all you care about is how things look at some party." But my mother didn't flinch. "You're embarrassing us. You've always been difficult, Madison. Don't make me regret all we've done for you." Tears blurred my vision. My daughter's monitors spiked, beeping wildly as if they could sense the storm raging inside me. And in that split second, I knew I could either keep sacrificing myself for a mother who'd never be satisfied, or finally choose the only person who truly mattered. So I said it. Words I never thought I'd say. "No, I'm not leaving my daughter. Not for you, not for anyone." And as I ended that call, I realized that might be the moment I saved both of us. My name is Madison Parker, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been divided into 2 worlds. The world I was born into, and the world I've been trying to build for myself. I grew up in a 2-story brick house in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, on a quiet street lined with neatly trimmed hedges and American flags fluttering from front porches. From the outside, we looked perfect. Inside, it felt like living under a microscope. My mother, Eleanor Parker, was the kind of woman who believed appearances were everything. Her hair was always perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She'd host charity luncheons and neighborhood cocktail parties, moving through the crowd with practiced grace, making sure every dish was arranged just so, every napkin folded into perfect triangles. And she demanded the same perfection from us, especially from me. My younger sister, Emily, was the golden child. She had straight A's, a dazzling smile, a gift for charming any room she walked into. By the time she was in middle school, people were already calling her little future lawyer. Meanwhile, there was me. I was decent in school, but not extraordinary. I played field hockey, but I was always picked last for the starting lineup. And I loved photography. Sneaking my dad's old Canon camera into my backpack, capturing moments nobody else noticed. A stray ray of sunlight filtering through tree branches, a dog sitting patiently by its owner's feet, my classmates laughing when they thought no one was watching. But to my mother, photography was a waste of time. "Art doesn't pay the bills, Madison," she'd say, her voice clipped. "You should be more like your sister. She's going places." That was the soundtrack of my childhood. Why can't you be more like Emily? Why can't you dress like Emily? Why can't you think like Emily? Dad tried to soften the blows. Charles Parker, my father, was an accountant at a respected Boston firm. A quiet man with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He'd pull me aside after my mother's scolding, place his big warm hand on my shoulder, and say, "Your mom means well, Maddie. She just wants the best for you." But deep down, I knew her vision of the best had nothing to do with me. She wanted me to be a polished, ambitious version of Emily, a daughter who'd make her look good at country club galas and PTA meetings. By high school, I stopped trying to compete. I pulled away, retreating into my photography and my writing, craving spaces where nobody expected me to fit into a mold. I started keeping journals, scribbling thoughts late at night when the house was silent. My only company, the moonlight spilling across my bedroom floor. Sometimes, I imagined myself running away, moving to New York or San Francisco, somewhere I could be invisible, free. Then, during my sophomore year at Boston University, I met Chris Harper. He was a computer engineering major. Funny, a little shy, brilliant in that absent-minded way, where he'd forget where he put his keys, but could solve complex algorithms in his head. Chris loved my photos. He thought my weird sense of humor was adorable, not embarrassing. And he never, ever compared me to anyone else. For the first time, I felt truly seen. Truly enough. We got engaged at 23 on a crisp autumn night in Beacon Hill. Under a canopy of gold and red leaves, Chris slipped a modest ring onto my finger and whispered, "I want to build a life with you, Madison, exactly as you are." I was shaking, partly from the chill, partly from how overwhelming it felt to be chosen, just for me. When I told my parents, my mother's lips tightened until they turned white. "An engineer. How practical," she said, each syllable dripping ice. "Madison, you're throwing away your future. You should be thinking about grad school, not marrying some boy who codes for a living." She tried everything, tears, guilt, scorn, to make me call it off. But for once, I stood my ground. Chris's family welcomed me like I'd always belonged. Sunday dinners full of laughter, his mother's famous chicken pot pie, his father cracking corny jokes. It felt like breathing after years underwater. Chris and I married in a small church in Cambridge. Simple, intimate, a ceremony filled with soft music and happy tears. My mother attended, wearing a stiff, forced smile, complaining afterward that my dress was too plain, the flowers cheap, the venue a disappointment. My father slipped me an envelope after the ceremony, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Maddie, never forget that." We moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Somerville, made it our own, mismatched furniture, thrift store rugs, a tiny balcony where we'd sit together on summer nights and watch the stars. Then Lily came along, and for a little while, it felt like the world finally made sense. Lily Harper was born on a rainy spring morning, her cry thin and fierce like she was announcing to the world she'd arrived, and she wouldn't be ignored. She had Chris's deep brown eyes and my unruly dark hair, and from the moment I held her, I felt something snap into place inside me, like a puzzle piece I hadn't even known was missing. In those first years, our little apartment was always filled with baby giggles, the sweet smell of formula, lullabies hummed in the middle of the night. Chris worked long hours at a software startup, often coming home with dark circles under his eyes, but he'd scoop Lily into his arms the minute he walked through the door. I'd watch them, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. Money was tight. We clipped coupons, shopped sales, skipped fancy vacations, but our life felt rich in all the ways that mattered. When Lily took her first steps, it was in the narrow hallway between the kitchen and our living room, Chris and I cheering like lunatics as she wobbled forward on chubby legs. And in that moment, I didn't care about my mother's lectures or Emily's bragging about her new downtown loft. All I cared about was that Lily was healthy, laughing, reaching for me with sticky fingers. But my mother never stopped interfering. Eleanor would call at random hours. "Madison, your sister just closed a huge case. She's flying to D.C. next week to meet senators. What are you doing these days?" Or, "Lily's hair is too long. Don't you think she'd look neater if it was shorter, like Emily used to wear hers?" Sometimes it was disguised as concern. "Are you sure freelancing is stable enough? What if Chris loses his job? Shouldn't you have a real career to fall back on?" It was relentless. Even when Chris was around, she'd drop comments. "Chris, have you thought about going back for your MBA? It might help you earn more. Madison shouldn't have to carry so much of the burden." He'd just smile politely, gripping my hand under the table. By then, I'd gotten used to our unspoken signals. A gentle squeeze meant, "Don't let her get to you." A light rub across my knuckles meant, "I've got your back." And I'd learned to plaster on a tight smile, nod, and change the subject. But no matter how many walls I tried to build, her words always found a way through the cracks. When Lily was 7, Chris and I finally scraped together enough for a weekend trip to New York City. It wasn't much: cheap hotel, free activities, dollar slice pizza. But to Lily, it was magical. She rode the Staten Island ferry with her face turned up to the wind, squealing when the city skyline sparkled at sunset. She pressed her hands against the glass at the Museum of Natural History, eyes wide at the dinosaur skeletons towering overhead. It was perfect, until we got home, and I made the mistake of showing my mother photos from the trip. She sniffed. "Well, that looks quaint. You really should take her somewhere nice sometime, like Paris. Emily's kids are going next spring. They'll learn so much culture." I stared at the photo in my hands. Lily's face lit with pure joy and felt a knife twist deep in my chest. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. And still, I kept the peace, because as much as Eleanor could cut me to the bone, Lily adored her. And part of me still clung to the hope that one day my mother might finally look at my life and simply say, "I'm proud of you," even if I knew deep down that day might never come. It was the first Saturday in March, a day that promised nothing more exciting than grocery shopping, laundry, maybe a movie night if Lily finished her homework. I'd just poured my first coffee, steam curling into the cool morning air, when Lily came bouncing into the kitchen, her cheeks pink with excitement. "Mom, can I go skiing with Ava and her family today? They're leaving in an hour." Her eyes were shining, that way they always did when she was brimming with possibility. My heart skipped. Skiing. Even the word made my stomach tighten. I'd been in a small skiing accident as a teenager, nothing catastrophic, but enough to leave me terrified of icy slopes. I took a slow breath, forcing myself not to let my own fear spill onto my daughter. "Okay, slow down, helmet." "Yes," she said, rolling her eyes. "Phone charged." "Of course, Mom, you're so dramatic." I ruffled her hair. "Humor your overprotective mother. Be careful out there, and text me every couple of hours, deal." She grinned, her braces flashing in the morning light. "Deal." 30 minutes later, I stood at the window, waving as Ava's SUV pulled away, Lily waving back ski poles rattling against her puffy jacket. I turned back to my coffee, trying to shake the unease crawling up my spine. At 11:17 a.m., my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice, calm but tight with urgency. "Mrs. Harper, this is Rebecca from Northridge Ski Patrol. Your daughter Lily's been in an accident. She hit a tree. She's being airlifted to Massachusetts General Hospital." The world seemed to narrow into a tunnel. My knees gave out, and I grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles went white. Is she alive?" I rasped. "She's unconscious, but they're working on stabilizing her. You need to get to the hospital as soon as you can." I don't remember driving there. Somehow, my hands found my keys, my foot hit the gas, and Boston streets blurred past my windshield. When I arrived, the ICU's fluorescent lights felt harsh and merciless. Doctors spoke in a language I barely understood. Severe head trauma, subdural hematoma, possible spinal involvement. I stared at them, willing my brain to process the words. "Is my daughter going to die?" I croaked. One doctor, a kind-eyed man with gray at his temples, gently replied, "She's very critical. The next 48 hours are crucial. We'll do everything we can, but you should prepare yourself. Head injuries can be unpredictable." They led me to Lily's room, and the sight stole the breath from my lungs. My vibrant, unstoppable daughter lay pale and motionless, a ventilator breathing for her, monitors blinking in jagged neon lines, half her face swollen, a bruise blooming purple and black across her temple. I pressed my hand to hers, careful of the IV lines snaking from her arm. "Hey baby, it's Mom. I'm right here." Her fingers didn't move. Her eyes stayed closed. For 3 days, I didn't leave that hospital room. I slept in a stiff chair, jolting awake every time her monitors beeped in a way I didn't understand. I talked to her about everything. About the school dance she was excited for. The science project half finished on our kitchen table. The tiny black kitten she'd been begging me to adopt. Nurses brought me coffee I barely tasted. Doctors explained scans and pressure readings, their voices blurring into white noise. And the whole time, a low, relentless fear throbbed through my chest. What if she never wakes up? What if this hospital room becomes the only place I'll ever see my daughter again? On the 3rd afternoon, my body was running on pure adrenaline, my head pounding from exhaustion. I hadn't showered, I hadn't eaten anything but vending machine crackers. I was sitting by Lily's bed, staring at the slow rise and fall of her chest, when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with my mother's name. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the green button. Part of me wanted to let it ring out, but some old reflex made me answer. "Mom." Her voice came through sharp and brisk. "Madison, your father's retirement party is tonight. You need to be here. Emily and the kids are already helping set up. We're expecting over 100 people. You cannot embarrass us by not showing up." My brain struggled to catch up. "Mom, Lily is in a coma. She might die. I can't leave her. My mother exhaled an impatient sigh. Madison, there's nothing you can do just sitting there. Doctors and nurses handle these things. Family obligations don't disappear just because you're facing challenges. The hospital lights seemed to flicker. My mother, the woman who'd spent my entire life lecturing me about duty, was telling me to leave my daughter's bedside, to go play hostess at a party. My mouth went dry. She's not a challenge, Mom. She's my daughter. She needs me. My mother's voice dropped to a dangerous softness. If you don't come, there will be consequences, Madison. Your father and I have supported you for years. Don't make us reconsider what we've done for Lily's college fund. Think carefully about the choice you're making. And that was the moment the fragile thread between us finally snapped. I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, my mother's last words echoing in my skull like church bells tolling doom. Lily's college fund. She'd held it over my head for years, reminding me that my choices were always, somehow, wrong. But this time, the stakes were different. This was my child's life. I slowly lowered my phone, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it onto the linoleum floor. A nurse named Grace, who'd been gently watching over Lily since the first night, slipped into the room. Her voice was soft as a lullaby. Hey, Madison, can I get you anything? Coffee, tea, maybe a sandwich? I blinked at her, barely hearing the words. I can't leave her? Grace laid a warm hand on my shoulder. I know, but you have to eat, or sleep, or something. You're running on fumes, hon. My eyes filled so fast I couldn't stop it, tears spilling over as I whispered, My mother just threatened to cut off Lily's college fund, because I won't go to my father's retirement party. Grace sucked in a sharp breath. You've got to be kidding me. I shook my head. She said, family obligations come first, that Lily will keep breathing whether I'm here or not, and that me being here is dramatic. Grace's mouth pressed into a thin line. Honey, family who loves you doesn't make you choose between them and your child's life. You know that, right? My voice cracked. Do I? Because all my life, she's made me feel like everything is my fault, like I'm the problem. Grace knelt beside my chair, looking me dead in the eyes. You are not the problem. You're a mom, fighting for your kid. Don't let anyone tell you that's wrong. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that love wasn't supposed to come with strings. But my brain was spinning, calculating. If my parents cut me off, Lily would lose the money set aside for her college tuition. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to matter. My phone buzzed again. Emily this time. Her text popped up on the cracked screen. Maddie, please just come. Mom's in one of her moods. Don't ruin Dad's night. Lily won't even know you're gone for a few hours. My chest tightened so hard I thought it might implode. I typed back, then erased it. Typed again, erased it. Finally, I shoved my phone into my purse and stared at Lily. Her eyelids fluttered slightly, but stayed closed. Her pale lips barely moved as the ventilator hissed and sighed beside her. I leaned close, my forehead nearly touching hers. Baby girl, I don't know if you can hear me, but I promise, I'm not leaving you, no matter what. My voice cracked into a sob. I don't care about parties or money or anything except you. Grace stood up. Why don't you go splash some water on your face? I'll sit with her. If anything changes, I'll come get you right away. I hesitated. 20 minutes, no longer. Deal, she said firmly. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. Red-rimmed eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun, salt stains drying on my cheeks. A far cry from the polished daughter Eleanor Parker had spent decades trying to mold. For a moment, guilt stabbed me, sharp and vicious. Was I being selfish? Should I just go to the party, put on a smile, keep the peace? Then Lily's face flashed in my mind. The way she'd clutched my hand on the ski lift last winter, whispering, Don't let go, Mommy, I'm scared. And I knew. I couldn't let go now. When I got back to Lily's room, Dad was there. Charles Parker, standing awkwardly at the foot of the bed, his shoulders hunched in his expensive coat. Hi, sweetheart, he said, his voice low. I wanted to fling myself into his arms, but something inside me held back. Does Mom know you're here? I asked. He winced. She's upset. She says you're tearing the family apart. I snorted. The family is tearing itself apart. Dad, I'm just trying to keep my daughter alive. He reached out, tentative, like he was afraid I'd pull away. I wish I knew how to fix this. Your mother's always been intense, but she loves you, Maddie, in her own way. My voice came out barely a whisper. Sometimes love hurts more than it heals, he sighed. I'll talk to her, try to calm her down. But we both knew. Eleanor Parker was a hurricane that couldn't be calmed, only endured. As Dad left, Lily's monitors began to beep erratically. Grace rushed in. It's okay, just some spikes. Might be neurological activity, which could be good. Let's keep watching. I clutched Lily's hand, my heart slamming against my ribs. Please, please let this be the start of her coming back to me. Outside, I could hear faint music drifting in from someone's phone down the hall. The sound of a pop song about dancing and freedom. And for a split second, I wondered what it would feel like to be free. Night fell like a heavy curtain over the hospital. The windows reflected back only my own exhausted face, and Lily's silent, fragile form. Machines hissed and beeped, each sound slicing through the silence like a clock counting down to some fate I couldn't control. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed again. I stared at the screen. Emily. I hesitated, but answered anyway. Her voice came through in a strained whisper. Maddie. Mom's crying. She's worked so hard for Dad's party. People are asking where you are. Can't you just come for an hour? My throat burned. Emily, my daughter is in a coma. How are you even asking me this right now? Emily exhaled shakily. I know Lily is sick, but Mom says this is typical of you, always making everything about your drama. She's worried what people will say if you're not here. She's threatening to tell everyone you're unstable. My chest constricted. Unstable. That word had hung over me my whole life. Whispered after arguments, hissed during fights, used like a blade to keep me compliant. I felt rage and heartbreak crash together like waves. Emily, do you hear yourself right now? My daughter might die. This isn't drama. This is my life, and I'm not leaving her. Not for Mom. Not for Dad. Not for anyone. There was silence, punctuated only by the faint static of Emily's breath. Please, Maddie, I don't want Mom to cut you off. Then she can cut me off, I snapped, shocking even myself with the steel in my voice. Emily whispered, Don't say that. Lily will need help for college, medical bills. Tears blurred my vision. I will figure it out. I'd rather work 3 jobs than teach my daughter that love means abandoning the people who need you most, just to keep up appearances. Emily began to cry, soft and desperate. I don't know what to do. Mom's losing it. Dad's trying to calm her down, but she keeps saying you're destroying the family. I closed my eyes, a deep ache pulsing behind my temples. I'm not destroying the family, Emily. I'm trying to save mine. Before she could reply, I ended the call. I dropped my phone onto the chair beside me, my hand shaking. For a moment, I sat there, gasping, my lungs fighting for air like I'd run a marathon. Then, I felt a shift deep in my chest. Something unclenching, an invisible chain snapping free. And for the first time in my life, I realized I was done apologizing for loving my child more than my mother's pride. Not 10 minutes later, the door burst open again. Eleanor Parker strode into the room, her coat still dusted with snow, her perfume wafting sharp and floral through the sterile hospital air. She looked around, lips pinched, eyes blazing. Madison, this has gone far enough. My shoulders tensed, but I didn't stand. I stayed seated beside Lily, my hand still wrapped gently around hers. Mom, keep your voice down. Lily's stable, but she doesn't need stress. Eleanor ignored me. Do you have any idea how humiliated we were tonight? People were asking where you were, whispering that you finally lost it. Do you want them thinking you're some hysterical single mother who can't cope? I felt a cold calm settle over me. Let them think whatever they want. I'm not leaving my daughter. Eleanor's nostrils flared. Madison, this selfishness has to stop. You've embarrassed this family for years with your choices. You married beneath you. You wasted your talent. You live in a tiny apartment when you could have had so much more. And now, you're letting your daughter suffer because you refuse to accept help and behave properly. My voice shook as it rose. Behave properly. Is that what you call abandoning my child for a party she's fighting for her life, Mom? And all you care about is how it looks to the neighbors." Eleanor sneered. "Don't take that tone with me, young lady. Everything we've ever done has been for you. And for Lily. That trust fund, the inheritance, you think that comes from nowhere? If you keep pushing us away, we'll have no choice but to cut you off completely. And then what will happen to Lily when she needs therapy or college or medical care? Have you thought about that? You're so irresponsible, Madison." My pulse thundered in my ears. "I've thought about it every second since she got hurt. And you know what? I'll figure it out. Because I'd rather be broke and honest than rich and living a lie." Her mouth twisted. "You're delusional. You're nothing without us. You never have been." I stood slowly, my legs trembling, but my voice steady. "No, Mom. I'm nothing without her. And I'd rather Lily grow up learning that love means loyalty than see me abandon her because my mother thinks a party is more important." Eleanor stared at me, chest heaving, eyes blazing with fury. "I see you've made your choice." "Yes," I said, my voice calm as glass. "I choose my daughter." Eleanor let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a sob and a snarl, then spun on her heel and stormed out of the room, her heels echoing down the hallway. As the door swung closed, I looked down at Lily and whispered, "We're going to be okay, baby, even if it's just you and me. We're going to be okay." And in that silence, I felt, for the first time in my entire life, free. An hour slipped by in the quiet. The air in Lily's room felt charged, like static before a storm. Machines hummed steadily, each green line on the monitor hypnotic in its rise and fall. I was so drained, I didn't even realize my head had dropped forward, my chin resting on Lily's blanket. I must have dozed. Because the next thing I felt was a faint movement under my hand. I blinked, disoriented, and stared down to see Lily's fingers, twitching. My breath caught in my throat. "Lily, sweetheart?" I leaned closer, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might shatter my ribs. Her eyelids fluttered. Once, twice. Then slowly, painfully, they opened. Brown eyes, dazed and glassy, stared up at me. A strangled sob burst out of my chest. "Oh my God, Lily, you're awake! You're awake!" Her lips barely moved around the ventilator tube. But I saw her trying, fighting to shape words she couldn't say. I squeezed her hand gently. "Don't try to talk. The doctors will handle the tube soon. Just stay with me, okay?" Tears rolled down my cheeks. Dr. Patel, the neurologist, came rushing in, his coat flaring behind him like wings. He leaned over Lily, shining a penlight into her eyes, checking reflexes, asking her to squeeze his fingers. She did. Weakly, but she did. Dr. Patel turned to me, a cautious smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "This is good, Mrs. Harper, very good. It means she's starting to come back to us. We'll take it slow, reduce the sedation further. Maybe remove the tube tomorrow if she's stable." My knees nearly gave out. I clutched the side of Lily's bed, trembling with relief. "Thank you, oh God, thank you." Lily blinked up at me, her eyes wet and shining, and for a moment everything fell away. The fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic, the arguments, the threats, the guilt, none of it mattered. All that existed was the weight of her small hand in mine, and the quiet miracle of her eyes finding mine across the void. I lowered my forehead to hers. "You scared the life out of me, kiddo. But you're here, and that's all that matters." Her fingers curled ever so slightly around mine, as if to say, "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, I knew. I hadn't just saved my daughter by staying. I'd saved myself. Days blurred into weeks. And somehow, Lily kept getting stronger, little by little. She began talking again, though her voice was raspy and soft at first. The first time she managed a whole sentence. "I'm hungry." I nearly fell out of my chair laughing and crying at the same time. She started physical therapy, shuffling slowly across the hospital floor, her hands gripping the parallel bars, her brow furrowed in fierce concentration. Every step was a victory, a tiny reclaiming of the life we'd almost lost. Eventually, Dr. Patel cleared her to go home, but he warned us. Recovery won't be a straight line. There might be memory issues, headaches, fatigue. Be patient and keep her world calm and supportive. I promised him I would. We moved back into our little apartment, and for the first few days, Lily slept more than she was awake, waking only to nibble toast or ask where her stuffed panda had gone. I hovered like a hawk, terrified of missing the slightest sign of trouble. But slowly, she found her old spark again. One evening, I found her at the kitchen table, drawing in her sketchbook. A wobbly pencil sketch of a snow-capped mountain, the same mountain where everything had changed. She looked up at me, eyes serious. I want to go back there someday, Mom. I don't want to be afraid of it forever. My heart twisted, pride and fear tangled together. I'll be right beside you when you do, sweetheart, I promise. Meanwhile, my relationship with my mother stayed fractured. She tried, in her way, sending fancy fruit baskets, expensive sweaters for Lily. But each gift arrived with a note dripping in quiet accusation. I hope this helps, since you insist on doing everything alone. I kept my distance, because I knew it wasn't enough anymore to keep the peace, if it meant losing myself. Emily reached out more often, gentle texts checking in. How's Lily doing today? It wasn't a perfect bridge, but it was something. Chris's parents flew in from Arizona. They filled our kitchen with the smell of cinnamon rolls, sat beside Lily during therapy sessions, and never once made me feel like I owed them anything but love. I found work again, taking on more freelance clients, writing late into the night, telling stories for brands who needed words to shine. Money was tight, but I felt lighter, freer, like the constant weight pressing on my chest had finally lifted. I still lay awake some nights, panicking about medical bills, college savings, the what-ifs, but then I'd hear Lily's soft breathing from her room. And remember, we'd survived. Not untouched, not unscarred, but together, and for the first time. I believed that was enough. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, 6 weeks after Lily came home, when I looked up from my laptop and saw my mother standing in my living room. Eleanor Parker, elegant as ever, trench coat dripping water onto the hardwood floor, her hands clutching a leather purse so tightly her knuckles were white. I froze. Mom, what are you doing here? She looked around, taking in our mismatched furniture, the clutter of medical bills stacked on the coffee table, Lily's crayon drawings taped to the walls. Her eyes shone, wet but defiant. I needed to see Lily, and I needed to see you. I crossed my arms, instinctively guarding the space between us. You could have called. You would have hung up, she shot back, voice trembling. I said nothing. She stepped closer, rain still glistening on her hair. I've been thinking, ever since that night at the hospital, about everything. I blinked at her, unsure where this was going. Eleanor took a shaky breath. All my life, I thought love meant keeping everything perfect, keeping everyone in line, protecting the family name, making sure nobody ever thought less of us. I thought if I controlled it all, nothing bad could happen. Her voice cracked, but bad things happened anyway. Your father's health, Lily's accident, none of it cared how perfect I tried to make everything look. She paused, pressing her fingers to her temples as if fighting off a headache. That night, when you chose Lily over the party, I thought you were destroying us. But maybe you were saving yourself and her. I swallowed, my throat tight. Mom, I didn't want to hurt you. I just couldn't leave my daughter. Tears spilled over her lashes. I know, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. My breath caught, because I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard those words. Eleanor reached out, hesitated, then gently touched my arm. I'm not good at this, letting go, admitting I'm wrong, but I don't want to lose you, or Lily. 1,000 memories flashed through my mind. The harsh words, the disappointments, the impossible expectations. But also, the smell of her perfume when she hugged me as a child. The way she'd stroke my hair when I had nightmares. Moments I'd buried but couldn't erase. I took a trembling breath. Mom, I can't go back to the way things were. I won't. I need boundaries, for me and for Lily. Eleanor nodded, tears streaking her carefully applied mascara. I'll try, Madison, I swear I'll try. And for the first time, I believed she meant it. Because in that moment, Eleanor Parker wasn't the ice queen I'd feared my whole life. She was just my mother, flawed, afraid, human. And as we stood there in the hush of the rain, I realized maybe healing didn't mean forgetting the past. Maybe it just meant deciding it wouldn't define us anymore. Summer came to Boston, long days spilling gold light through the windows, the air thick with the smell of blooming lilacs. Lily was back at school part-time, her hair longer now, the scar near her temple fading slowly, like a memory that still hurt, but no longer bled. She walked with a slight limp, but she didn't try to hide it. One afternoon, as we sat on our tiny balcony, she looked up from a paperback and asked, "Mom, are we ever going to be close with Grandma again?" The question hit me like a stone. I stared out at the rooftops, sunlight glinting off distant windows, and tried to find the right words. "I don't know, baby. Sometimes people love each other, but hurt each other too. Grandma and I, we're trying to figure it out." Lily tilted her head, thoughtful as ever. "She always made you look so small, even before my accident." Her words were soft, but they pierced straight to my heart. "Yeah, she did," I admitted. She leaned closer. "But you're not small, Mom. You're the bravest person I know." My chest squeezed so tight I thought it might break. "Thanks, kiddo, that means more than you know." A gentle breeze rustled the pages of her book, and I found myself thinking about everything we'd been through. The hospital, the beeping monitors, my mother's threats, and the quiet, unyielding truth I'd discovered. That sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. I looked at Lilium and said softly, "You know, sweetheart, life's gonna throw hard things at you. People will try to tell you who you should be, what choices you should make, but only you get to decide who you are, and love, real love, doesn't come with conditions." She nodded, eyes bright and solemn, like you stayed with me, even when everyone else wanted you to leave. "Exactly," I said. "Because you're my world, and I'll always choose you over everything else." She smiled. "Then I'll always choose you too." I felt the summer sun warm my skin, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't measuring my worth against someone else's expectations. I was simply here, alive, whole. And I realized I'd learned some things I wanted to remember and share. Love is loyalty, not control. Boundaries don't destroy families, they save them. You are allowed to protect your peace, even from the people who raised you. And sometimes the family you build matters more than the one you were born into. So to anyone listening, if you've ever felt torn between pleasing others and honoring yourself, if you've ever stood in a hospital room or a quiet kitchen, or sat awake at 3 a.m., wondering if you were enough, let me say this: you are, and sometimes the hardest choice you'll ever make is the one that finally sets you free. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear yours. Drop a comment, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that remind you you're not alone. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is the one that truly saves us.